Hello, I'm Marites Vitug. Welcome to Rappler Talk. Joining us is Professor Herman Kraft, a political scientist who currently chairs the Political Science Department of the University of the Philippines. I will be talking to Professor Kraft about the prospects of liberal democracy under the presidency of Marcos Jr. 36 years after the Marcos family was disgraced, was deposed, they are back, and it's a full restoration. You can send your questions via the comment section of Facebook. Thank you so much, Professor Kraft, for making time for this interview.
Thank you for having me, Marites.
Yes, siguro yung unang tanong, ito yung isang irony ng uh, on June 30, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. will take his oath uh, under the 1987 Constitution, which was drafted in response to the authoritarian rule or the dictatorship of his father. How will that be? I mean, do you see a great dissonance, or how will his rule be anchored on the 1987 liberal democratic constitution?
Well, um, I don't see any. Let's put it this way. No, at this point in time, um, uh, I don't really see any dissonance between the two prospects. No, of course, there's the suspicion that he will actually bring back the kind of rule that his father brought in, no, or for that matter, actually continue the kind of illiberal presidency that we actually had under President Duterte, no. But technically speaking, he will actually have to conduct his presidential administration, no, under the kind of liberal democratic aspirations, no, that the 1987 Constitution actually represents. No, so we'll just have to see how he's going to make sense of that, how he's going to work within those aspirations, no, that our Constitution actually represents, no, and whether the kind of administration that he's going to head, no, will uphold it, no, or actually change it, no, for lack of a better term, no, transform it into something else.
Kagaya nung nangyari kay President Duterte in the past 6 years, as you were talking about earlier before the interview, hindi naman niya kinailangan na palitan yung constitution, but he proceeded, he unleashed the violent war on drugs, which violated the rule of law. So ang tingin mo, Ferdinand Marcos Jr. can do the same thing? Hindi niya kailangan tinker with the constitution? He can just, yeah?
That really depends, right? No, but it's a question of what is the objective of tinkering with the Constitution, right? Right now, the Constitution already presents us with a very strong presidency, right? In fact, even the 87 Constitution is, if you look at the executive branch there, no, a lot of analysts have actually said that the Philippine president is actually one of the most powerful, no, constitutionally speaking, no, in terms of the powers that are actually granted to him. Um, of course, there are certain things that the president under the 87 Constitution cannot do that we might associate with an authoritarian or a dictatorship. No, in other words, everything has to. And this is what characterizes a liberal democracy, supposedly, right? A liberal democratic political system, no. We could talk about it in terms of some elements. No, number one is that there has to be competition between very distinct political parties. No, there is the rule of law, and therefore strong institutions that actually provide checks and balances, no, between the different branches as well as the different institutions of government, no. But thirdly, and I think this is where a lot of the issues, no, arise, no, when we talk about President Duterte, no, the rule of law actually slides into questions that have to do with the observance, no, and protection of human rights, no, civil liberties, no, and I think to a certain extent, no, this has also been associated, no, with the idea of a market economy, no, that where there is competition, there is no favoring of different of certain particular corporations, no, and so on, no. So that means to say that it's the rule of law that actually guides, no, the
Mm.
way that that both political, social, no, and economic engagements, no, and relationships, no, uh, are conducted, no. So in that sense, if you look at if you look at the case of the Duterte administration, for instance, no, it was working within the 1987 constitution,
Mm.
no, which is supposed to be liberal democratic in terms of its aspirations, its values, no, but at the same time he actually was a very illiberal president, right? In the way that he ignored, no, and was allowed to ignore uh, elements of the law, no, in the way that he actually proceeded with his war on drugs, no, and the way that this war on drugs was actually conducted. Until now, for instance, you still have a lot of cases, no, of killings, no, that remain unresolved, no, and the only thing that he actually was talking about, no, in that context, no, was the idea that, look, I am responsible for this, I should be the one na no. So kumbaga sinasabi niya na kung may kukulong kayo, ako yon dapat, hindi yung mga pulis, no, kasi ako yung umutos sa kanila, no. But of course that didn't happen, and it's not going to happen now at this point in time. Oh,
So
sorry.
look, yeah.
I won't say that it's not going to happen, no, pero kumbaga the prospect, no, of it happening, no, seems unlikely at this point.
Yeah. So looking back nga dito sa 6 years ng Duterte, has he paved the way for a similar type of leader, an illiberal leader? Parang mas madali ba for Marcos Jr. to be an autocrat? Because ito na yung playbook niya eh. Ito na yung iniwanan niya na pwede palang gawin ng susunod na leader. What do you think?
If he chooses to, no, I guess that's the point here, that it's the playbook, right? If Marcos Jr. actually chooses to be an autocrat like uh, President Duterte, although he hasn't he hasn't really displayed the kind of character and personality that we associate with President Duterte, no, as yun nga, as an illiberal. But if he chooses to, right, it seems like what President Duterte has been able to do, no, is something that he can follow. Meaning to say that if you think about it, no, what President Duterte's illiberal presidency, no, I won't say that it's an illiberal democracy, because technically speaking, we're still working within the liberal democratic values of the 87 constitution. But his illiberal presidency, no, actually shows or expose the weaknesses, no, of the institutions that of our political institutions, our administrative institutions, no, that are actually supposed to be the ones that are supposed to operationalize, no, the aspirations in the 87 constitution.
Mm.
So in other words, we might have all of those aspirations towards a liberal democratic system, no, but our institutions, no, are not up to, no, being able to protect those or at least push for those aspirations, no, and protect them. So kaya ka nagkakaroon ng issues na kung saan all of a sudden human rights issues, no, are just being ignored, no, they're being set aside, no. So those are the kinds of things that I think, no, was exposed by the Duterte administration, no. Now of course the question is, well, is there going to be any urgency in terms of strengthening those institutions, no? Doon lang sa issue ng doon lang sa issue ng political dynasties natin. Supposedly nandoon 'yon sa nandoon sa constitution 'yon, no? And yet our legislature has not really acted in a way that would minimize or diffuse the impact of political dynasties in the Philippines.
Okay, dito sa medyo big picture, if we look back, we've had liberal democracy nga from 1986 until 2016. So that's about 30 years, no? Tapos dumating si Duterte 2016 hanggang today, that's 6 years. And then if Marcos chooses nga to adopt the Duterte playbook, that will be 12 years. And people are saying if Sara Duterte wins or runs for president in 20 after Bongbong, that will be like 18 years. So we've relatively enjoyed 30 years of liberal democracy. And then now we face 6 years under Duterte and maybe potentially another 6 years of Bongbong Marcos. Is this just a wave that we're experiencing because people are like some are pessimistic that we're going to a dark period in our history and that this may take time, or is this just a certain wave in our period in our history?
I think the interesting point here goes back to the question of what led people to choose a known autocrat, no, like President Duterte, for instance, no. I mean, there, wala naman wala naman tinago sa atin in terms of what he intended to do when he was going to become president, right? I think we were just shocked that he pushed through with what he said he was going to do. No, but if we look at this situation kasi, parang ang kailangan natin tignan is yung attitude ng mga botante natin. Now, I guess the point that I'm making is this. Unless there's going to be a push to change the Constitution is still going to be there. Expectations that it actually create, that it represents, no, uh, uh, goes back to the same kinds of uh, factors, no, which led to the emergence of a Duterte, no, now a Marcos, no, and prospectively, I think as you mentioned, no, another Duterte after 6 years, no. Is it just a wave, or is it where we're actually going, no? Like I said, unless there's going to be a push to change the Constitution, to institutionalize, no, the kind of illiberality, no, that was represented by the presidency of President Duterte, no, which will be continued on, no, then ang ano natin dito is that the same waves or the same kinds of factors, no, which led to you might say disappointments, no, um, with the kind of liberal democratic rule that we should have had, no, from 86, no, until 2016, no, would also be the thing that might actually lead to, no, I won't say the downfall, no, but the change in our political prospects, no, if people actually find, no, that even with autocrats, no, or strong leaders, for instance, no, their conditions do not change, no, then I think that would also lead to the situation where the same situation which led to, of course, the emergence of autocrats, no, would also swing back, no, would swing back the preference, no, for probably something that is actually much more different, no, than autocratic rule. Again, it's a question of being able to address, no, the disappointments, no, of people. I mean, the question that has to be asked is why did our voters now choose to actually go back to or at least vote for, no, seem to be much more consistent in terms of getting autocrats, potential autocrats, no, rather than getting outright Democrats, or at least identified Democrats, no, and so I think the question here is, what is it that people are actually feeling? And if the narrative here, no, has to do with the idea that, kasi pag kinausap mo mga taxi driver, mga sinasabi nila na wala namang pinagbagong mga ang buhay namin, no? So what has to I think what we can actually see here is that if if there is no move, and this is not an unlikely event, if there is no move to change the constitution, then the same kinds of conditions that actually allowed the emergence of autocrats in our government would also be the ones that would lead to potentially the removal or the shift in preferences as far as our voters are actually concerned. What I am actually interested in seeing is where are um uh, uh, these strong men, this potential autocrats that we have now, going to take us, in terms of the kinds of going to take us, in terms of the kind of political changes, that we might actually face, under a Marcos administration.
Sorry, I was on mute. Actually, the next 6 years are really going to be maybe what we call um, anxiety-inducing years. But anyway, so you talked about the Philippines. Let's expand a bit. In Southeast Asia, commentators, analysts say the Philippines lost the title of being the most stable democracy in the region. We lost it to Indonesia. And I was asking you earlier before the interview, paano nangyari yon? What does Indonesia have that we don't? Why did we miss out on this being the most stable democracy distinction in the region?
Look, democracies are not just about. I mean, elections are just one of the. It might be the most important, element in a democracy, But elections are just one. Constitute one of the institutions, that are important for a democracy to work over time, right? So that includes, of course, working checks and balances, for instance, that means the ability to, or the different branches of government, should not be colluding, there should actually be ways by which a strong president can be checked by a strong legislature as well, the way things are going with us, the tendency is for political coalitions to be built around whoever is the winning candidate, for the presidency. In other words, one of the things that characterizes our, and this is no secret, that characterizes our democracy is the weakness of our institutions, so that strong personalities, can do, what President Duterte actually did, and ignore those institutions, to their detriment, I think Indonesia from the very start, instituted, or maybe had a tradition of strong political institutions. They made sure about this. One of the things that they actually have right now are more consistent national parties, for instance, that are actually able to compete, for the for national offices, which is something that clearly, we don't have in the Philippines, so in other words, it's the stability of their institutions, and the way that those institutions are able to uphold, whatever is the aspiration within their constitution, that I think gives an advantage to Indonesia right now compared to how we've been doing things in the Philippines.
Yes, and earlier also we were talking about how despite Marcos being a strong man and he formed the Kilusang Bagong Lipunan, when he left, the party broke down. As you said,
Yeah.
because this is it focused on one person, right?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, we keep on talking about the idea that Philippine politics tend to be personalistic, no?
Yes.
Um, and we don't really rely on institutions, and yet most experts, no, or most scholars, no, who have studied democracies, no, emphasize the importance of institutions like political parties, no. That's just one of those, no. Kaya pagka kinausap mo yung mga kasama ko sa department namin, sasabihin nila kailangan natin ng mga reforma doon sa mga institusyon natin. That includes electoral reform, political party reform, no, so on and so forth. Um, it's the emphasis on the need to actually strengthen our institutions that I think is becoming a key element, no, around this discussion or this debate regarding uh, the sustainability, no, of our liberal democracy.
Yes, and as we saw in this recently concluded elections, yung supporters ni Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ang mga dynastic families talaga.
Yeah,
Arroyo, Villars, Estrada, and locally as well, no? So
that's right.
you were saying earlier that because the dynasty's rule prevail, ito yung would you consider them the single biggest detriment to a genuine political competition?
I would think so because although let's put it this way, no. One of the interesting discussions that we have around Philippine politics, no, is that when we discuss dynasties, no, we look at dynasties actually as local phenomena. Okay, there is no such thing as a national political dynasty in the Philippines, right? So which means that whoever wins the presidency happens to be might be part of a dynasty, no, who at that particular point in time, no, has become has managed to actually get a leg up on the others, no. So in other words, no, dynasties in the Philippines are actually about local politics. Okay. Which basically means that unless there is some transformation at the local level, no, of how local politics are actually conducted, no, then dynasties tend to actually become strong. I think in Ateneo, the Ateneo School of Government has actually talked about the idea of fat and thin dynasties. No, that is to say that there are dynasties, no, that are not really that embedded, no, and therefore can be can still be replaced. For instance, no, this is what happened with the Eusebius in Pasig, for instance, no. But by and large, no, especially if you go outside of Metro Manila, no, there are political dynasties that have actually and continue to be the dominant political institution, no, uh, within our local politics, no, in different areas of the country, no. So if the question is, are they the number one detriment to ano, um I would actually argue yes, no. The weakness, I point to two elements, no. It's dynastic politics in the Philippines, and then the second is the weakness of our political institutions.
And today we're seeing an alliance of two dynastic families, Marcoses and the Dutertes. Dito sa mga political alliances, when do this become, when do they break? I mean, they start strong, ngayon ang lakas nila,
Yeah.
overwhelming yung mandate, pero what usually lead to breaking up of political alliances?
Parang Game of Thrones na 'yan, eh, 'di ba? Parang ang magiging question ngayon diyan ay, kung may napag-usapan na ano, in other words, these kinds of alliances are based on, mutual understandings, no, of mutual benefits, no? They're transactional really, no? So as long as the the objectives, no, of being part of the alliance are actually met, no, then of course we can see a continuation of these kinds of coalitions being formed, no, and not only formed but continuing. When do they break? It's when uh, uh, these kinds of political alliances break when um, at least one of the parties, no, start thinking that, no, either their interests are not being served, no, or that they can do better, no, and basically break out of the alliance. So like I said, it's transactional. So ang nangyayari niyan is if the parties find that their interests are being served by being part of the coalition, then that will continue. Pero kung nakikita nila na hindi na, no, meron na mga bagay na kumbaga hindi na nangyayari in accordance with what they think, no, best serves, no, the interest of their of their political family, no, then I think you're going to see a breakup, no, in these alliances now.
So there's really a lot to watch out for in the coming 6 years. And also maybe last question, Professor Kraft. Ang laki ng daming problems itong ating politics and political system. What is the biggest ngayon job for the opposition? wag naman 1 hour discussion. Yeah, I know it's tough, but maybe just a brief your insights on what is the toughest job now for the opposition.
Okay. The opposition has to be able to may dalawa siyang nakikita ko na importanteng dapat ma-accomplish. Number one is to survive, right? Meaning to say that the kind of group, no, that constituted the support for, sabihin natin, the Robredo campaign, no, if it is to become an effective and continue to be an effective opposition, no, then that has to be sustained, right? So in a sense, the idea of creating an NGO, no, to harness to continue harnessing this group is probably a good way of doing that, no. But the other part of it, no, is the notion of being able to provide an effective opposition, meaning to say na parang hindi lang siya opposition na pwedeng i-ignore, no. But that means building coalitions or at least expanding the coalition, no, that constitutes the opposition to the administration, no, beyond the groups, no, that actually form its constituent parts, no. So hindi po pwede na kung sino lang yung grupo that supported Robredo and Pangilinan, no, na sila lang kailangan i-expand mo ngayon yung na yon, no. Then that will mean actually trying to convince people, no, voters, no, that the opposition can provide an effective alternative. No? So parang ito ngayon yung counter narratives mo. No, kasi parang malaking parte kasi noong kampanya, no, is the kinds of narratives that were actually presented, no. So this now becomes a part of what it is that the opposition must be able to do, no, is to actually present a set of counter narratives, no, that is both convincing, no, and presents, no, presents to the voters, no, a much better notion of what is happening, no, to our politics, no, and where that politics is actually taking the country.
Okay, Thank you so much, Professor Kraft. Marami tayong pag-iisipan at babantayan itong next 6 years. And Professor Kraft will still be around to talk about this on and off for the next 6 years, pang matagalan. So we hope that we will continue this conversation and always be aware of parang sabi nga na kung as a citizen, kailangan natin maging vigilant. So thank you once more, Professor Kraft, and thank you to our viewers and listeners. Bye!
Thank you. Bye.